If you're on through your computer, then you can have to mute your phone. Otherwise, we'll get ready to start. Can everybody see the Internet of Things and cyber threats? Okay, so let's begin. The whole purpose of this meeting is to have a quick 15-minute webinar on the Internet of Things and cyber threats. And I just want to say welcome to all those that are here. We appreciate you having spent the 15 minutes. And we will get started here right now. So this is the Internet of Things and Cyber Threats, the 15-minute webinar. We're going to have a panel discussion today, and we have three people. My name is Ed McNamara. I'm the CEO of Armada Risk Partners. Obviously, we're a full-service broker here based out of Cleveland and offices in Tampa. And on our panel today are two great people. One is John Heyman. He is a partner at Myers Roman in the labor and employee practice, as well as the chair of the cyber group as well. Welcome, John.
Good to be here.
I also want to welcome Michelle Mowry. She is the managing account executive at Travelers Insurance, and her expertise is also cyber insurance. So I want to welcome to you as well, Michelle.
Thanks, Ed.
What I wanted to do today is just quickly give a 15-minute example, and I wanted to kind of introduce how we came up with this topic of the Internet of Things. We had an article that Cranes put out electronically about this. I think it's important to realize. So for the last few years, everybody's been hearing about cyber and how it's affecting them personally, and how it's starting to attack corporations, and how it's starting to affect business. Now, for the last few years, when we've talked about it to clients, we've always talked about, protecting data, protecting your customers' data, protecting your employees' data, and that's extremely important, especially in the retail space. So you've heard about Target attack, and that was where people's identity got stolen. You heard about the WellPoint, which was basically Blue Cross Blue Shield and Anthem, where a lot of data was stolen. Millions of people's data records were stolen, including my own, in which case they had my Social Security number and everything you could possibly have, and they actually filed a tax return in my name and asked for a lot of money back, and we were able to stop that because I filed like a day later. So those type of attacks we've always talked about, and everybody's understanding, and I think starting to begin to think about that. But when you take it to the next level in manufacturing, I think it becomes a unique thing because most people don't understand with the Internet of Things, and that is the new buzzword coming out, which means everything is being connected. Everything is being connected to the Internet, including your toaster oven, your refrigerator, your security system, and your crock pot, as other people mentioned. But what happens now is that because everything is going to be on the Internet, it changes. It's no longer just data. So when you think about manufacturing specifically, I think what caused us to talk about today is that it's no longer about protecting your employees' data or your clients' data. It's actually helping your company not stop production. So if you think about the automation in manufacturing going on with production monitoring and downtime tracking systems, with automation systems that are out there, you are now starting to hear about Internet cyber attacks on manufacturing that is literally stopping manufacturing, logging onto your system and shutting down your software so your production actually stops. And that is happening more and more and more, and that's starting to become a concern because you want to be able to have access to your own data, but as soon as you have access to your data on the Internet, so does everybody else. So fortunately, by working with certain carriers like Travelers and others, they have come up and created some current interesting policies to protect your business when it goes down for what is called a business interruption. We'll get into that later on. But let me bring in the panel. Let me get in the panel and let me ask some questions here to John and to Michelle. So I'll ask John first. John, give me an example of what you've heard of a cyber attack and an interesting little story that you know of.
Well, first of all, what's interesting to me is, we think of cyber as not always going to be on manufacturers' radars, which is why it's so important that we're having this call today. We think of cyber attacks, we think of, we typically think of PII, personally identifiable information, so healthcare records, financial records, and the like. So we think of banks being hit, we think of financial institutions, we think of healthcare institutions as the primary targets. What's most interesting to me is that IBM, which tracks this stuff on an annual basis, according to their latest survey, now has manufacturing as the #2 industry most likely to get hit by a cyber attack, right behind healthcare. And it's crept up year to year. So 2014 it was #3, 2013 it was number 5 or 6. The 2015 survey they just completed, manufacturing falls right behind healthcare as the industry most targeted for cyber attacks. And what kind of things are they looking for? They're looking for exactly what you talked about, potentially shutting down a manufacturer to hold them for ransom. You pay us X before we'll open your network up. There's Chinese manufacturers that are looking to hack in and steal your trade secrets, your intellectual property, so they can knock off your products and sell them overseas. And so we're talking about protecting your manufacturing processes both from a production standpoint, but also from an IP standpoint. And to manufacturers, their IP, their proprietary processes, what they build, what they make, and how they do it is often their most valuable asset. So that's really what we're talking about here.
That's good stuff, and I appreciate that. I find it very, very interesting. Listen, there's a couple people out there that have logged on, and for some reason they're also participating. So if you can mute your end, that'd be great. There's a couple people that are providing a lot of feedback, so I try to reach out to them personally, and hopefully they can put it on hold. Like Josh Holden, please mute your phone. Michelle, what tells a sample or a story you have about cyber?
I have 2 quick good ones that are specific to manufacturers here in our territory. So these are real claim examples. We had one that one of our manufacturing clients with about $100 million in revenue was infected with a malware virus. The criminals gained access to the plant's production system that shut them down for over a week. So they had to retain
that's a long time. That's a long time, a week.
They had to get a computer forensic expert in to figure out how it happened and also deal with the repairs and restoration of the systems, which is a pretty significant expense in addition to the estimated revenue lost of over $1.5 million. Another one that we had also in our territory was a paper file situation where the IRS discovered that a company with over 400 employees had fraudulent tax returns filed on behalf of about half of those employees. The FBI let the company know that they had found this. Again, a forensic investigator had to be brought in to determine how this was all accessed. It turned out it was a box of stolen W-2s that were on their way to a storage facility. They had to, incur the forensic expenses, the credit monitoring and notification expenses, in addition to some other legal costs. They also, after the local media found out about this, hired a public relations firm. So there were costs associated with that, and all in they paid out of pocket, because they were not insured with us at the time, about $750,000.
I'm sorry, did you say $750,000 used just for forensics?
For the forensics, and I believe the notification expenses were a part of that as well.
Okay, and so that's real dollars, and was that covered by insurance?
It was not at the time. They're an insured of ours now.
Okay, so both of those were.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I think it's important that we talk here about if I was a manufacturer, what do you do, right? So what do you do prior to an attack, and what do you do post-attack? So, John, why don't you tell me about what, besides buying insurance, which obviously we would always recommend, right? But what can you do from an internal point of view of letting people know it's not just the employee information that could go out there. It's a malware hack. It's a stopping of your production. What do you do from communication with your legal, your HR, your employees? What do you suggest, John?
Creating a culture of cyber awareness, within your organization. Studies show that the #1 threat to a business is actually a business's own employees, and we're not talking about a malicious insider or a malicious ex-employee. We're talking about an employee who just doesn't know that, clicking on a link from an email that looks like it's from PayPal or from Amazon, but is actually a phishing email, is going to open their employer's network up to malware, viruses, ransomware, and the like. So it's all about creating a culture of cyber awareness within an organization, making employees understand that they are the company's first and really best line of defense against a cyber attack. Making sure employees, know what a phishing email looks like and how to prevent against it. Making sure employees understand that just because a Wi-Fi network is called Google Starbucks doesn't mean that it actually belongs to a Starbucks. It might be someone who has just named their network Google Starbucks to get unsuspecting people to log on. During the RNC here in town, a reporter set up numerous fake Wi-Fi networks outside the Quicken Loans Arena with luring names like, Google Starbucks or Voters for Trump or We Hate Hillary or whatnot. And 69% of people in and around the arena logged on to those networks, which would have opened their devices and potentially their employers' networks up to malicious outsiders looking to do bad things. So it's about training, it's about education, and it's really about making sure that your employees understand, and really I don't mean at a cursory level, I mean at a deep level understand that they are your company's first and best defense against a cyber criminal getting into your organization.
It's funny because I just heard of a professional organization in this town that has over 300, almost 400 employees, and their IT department sent out a test email, just like what you said, that said, open immediately because you could be a winner. And they said that 38% of their employees opened it up, and 7 of them actually filled out the form that said, put in your social security number and your home address. And they actually did that. And I thought it was a great exercise from their IT department to come back to them and say, what are you doing? But again, this is for anybody, right? I want to talk to Michelle about, what would you do from an insurance coverage point of view? It's not that expensive, by the way. Cyber for a privately held manufacturing facility is not a lot of money. It's pretty insignificant. But there's a lot of varying products out there, Michelle. And what would one thing that you'd make sure you had in your cyber coverage if you were a manufacturer?
I would have all the agreements, the third and the first party. We have 11 different coverages available. The first party, let's start with the third party. It covers the network and information security liability. So any of those claims from unauthorized access to data, failure to provide notification of a breach, or transmission of a computer virus would all be covered there. We offer some communications and media liability on a third-party liability form, and that's any kind of copyright infringement, intellectual property, plagiarism, defamation, libel, slander that you're putting out either electronically on your website, in an annual report. We cover both electronic and non-electronic data for manufacturers.
Okay, now, someone logs in and stops my machine from producing for a week. Are you going to cover that?
We're getting to the first-party insuring agreements, so that would be covered under the business interruption and expenses insuring agreement. So that's your loss of income and the expenses incurred to restore the operations as a result of some system disruption by a virus or unauthorized attack.
Okay, so
we also cover computer fraud, funds transfer fraud on a first-party basis, so some of those phishing schemes and even a rogue employee transfer of funds, there's coverage afforded under those agreements.
Yes, let me go one more step further on that, because cyber we've been trying to sell for years, and it's been covering those type of, access of data type claims that you mentioned. But the one that we kind of, the business interruption has been added new in the last few years, and most people don't look. And it's interesting because before, in order for there to be coverage for business interruption, that usually is under a property policy, and that means there has to be some type of physical claim. And the problem is that someone logs in and shuts your computer off. There's no physical quote-unquote damage. It's all data. So now companies like Travelers have added this business interruption from a cyber point of view, which means you don't have to have a physical damage that you normally would have on a property side that triggers your business interruption insurance. You now have a business interruption that is triggered on a cyber side. So in other words, if someone logs in and shuts down your manufacturing for a week and you lose $3.2 million, if you buy the limits, it's going to be covered under business interruption on a cyber policy. I think that's overlooked when you talk about the actual manufacturing side of that. And Michelle, how long have you guys been doing that now?
About 7 years.
7 years.
I mean, we're evolving. The business interruption is a newer concept in the cyber market globally, but yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, but the GL policies are starting to put some pretty absolute cyber exclusions on their policies, which is not only going to affect your business interruption, but it's also going to affect your personal and advertising injury extensions under that as well.
Yeah, so they're getting into what's called the brand protection exclusions, to where, when you look at Target that had lost a lot of business, they lost millions of dollars in stock loss, and so that's being excluded. If you look at Southwest Airlines as a perfect example, their computer system shut down. They actually couldn't fly for almost 2 days. That's millions of dollars that normally would not have been protected if they didn't have some form of business interruption on their cyber. So I think that's an interesting fact there. So let me quickly review, because again, I wanted to keep this to 15 minutes, and we're right there now. These are attacks that are happening more and more often that are trying to affect regular businesses that normally would not purchase cyber insurance. But now the more people are using the internet for production, they have to realize that there's cyber coverage, which is, again, for a middle market manufacturing company with a couple hundred employees, it's not outrageous amount of money we're talking. We're not talking $100,000 for $1 million worth of coverage, right? We're talking tens of thousands, or even the low tens of thousands of dollars. So it's very, very inexpensive to have coverage for that. Secondly, you've heard some examples of what to do in the HR department, in not only in testing your people or making sure people don't click on things, but it's one of these things where you need to let everybody know that touches a computer or has anything to do with it that these are out there and they're happening every day. So why don't we do this? I want to open it up to see if there's any questions out there specifically on how it might affect your company, whether it's a manufacturing company or not, specifically of an example of is this covered or not, or an example of, how do we do this? So if you have a question, you can unmute your phone and just go ahead and ask, or there's also a way to raise your hand and we can answer you as well. So does anybody have any questions out there? I know usually on these phone-ins that people are usually just kind of listening and they don't have a way to raise their hands or to make a comment. So we'll give it another 10 seconds. But
Ed, let me add while people are gathering their thoughts. If people are on the fence about whether or not cyber insurance is a good idea or something they need for their business, consider that the average cost of a data breach in the U.S., when you factor in the forensics and the response plan that you have to do to your customers and vendors and anyone whose data was compromised, and the downtime and all of that, the average cost of a data breach in the U.S. is $7 million per breach, or approximately $220 per record stolen. So if you're on the fence as to whether or not you think cyber insurance, this type of insurance product, is something you need for your organization, consider whether or not your organization, your company, can absorb a $7 million hit. And also consider that, a cyber attack, a breach, is not an if question but a when question, because every company is going to get breached. It's just a question of when it's going to happen. Next week, next month, next year, 5 years from now, it's going to happen. And so part of your decision-making and whether or not you're prepared for that breach is whether or not you are financially prepared to pay to remedy it. And if you got $7 million in the bank that you can, spend, more power to you. But I think most, if not all people on this call would say that would be a catastrophic loss for their business. So consider that when you're deciding whether or not you think cyber insurance is a good idea for your business.
I was really surprised a little further to that, John. Net Diligence reported that manufacturing is the 4th largest industry for data breaches in the U.S. right now, with over 1/3 of the identified manufacturing organizations having been targets in the past 2 years.
Yeah, that is, it's stunning data. And just to recap here, I put on the screen the contact information for everybody because not all of it's insurance, not all of it's can we get it covered. Some of it is a very important legal matter. That's why someone like John wouldn't be the chair of a whole cyber division legally, because there are internally or not internally. So I've listed John Hyman and Michelle Mowry, and so I wanted to say thank you, John and Michelle. Okay. And I wanted to say if there's anybody else has any questions, feel free to reach out to them directly or reach out to us.
If anyone is really interested in just kind of a ballpark indication of the insurance premiums, get in touch with Ed. We offer those indications just based with your name, website, and your annual revenue.
Right, so it's a pretty easy thing to do as well. So, John and Michelle, I want to say thank you, and thank you to all our participants. And please reach out if you have any questions. I will leave this up for a while because please feel free to contact John or Michelle directly or ourselves if you have any questions. And I want to say thank you all for participating, and I hope you got something out of this short little webinar, and look forward to doing them again in the future. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.